in funding to support UNITAID for the next 5 years. But when you see the return on investment on only one innovation like this one, return on investment of $7 billion, you understand the importance on investing in early introduction of new tools in low and middle income countries, and that's part of the work of UNITAID. Thank you.
Thank you, Hervé. Do we have questions for Hervé? No, I don't see any. So thank you very much for sharing that promising update, and bon voyage. We'll now turn to Jens of OCHA, who will speak to the high-level pledging event for the humanitarian response in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. Jens, over to you.
Thank you, Rolando. Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. We have an event on next Wednesday, which is webcast here, and I thought I wanted to flag it because you may be interested. It's on Wednesday, it starts at 3 p.m. and it's webcast on UNWeb TV. It is the high-level pledging event for the humanitarian response in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. And we are doing this in collaboration with the following countries: Italy, Qatar, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. And of course, in collaboration and participation of Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. Just a couple of words of what the background is. As you know, famine was not declared in this region, but that does not mean that tragedy was averted. There are more than 43 million people who need assistance across these three countries. And while we have seen improved rains after unprecedented drought, now those rains have triggered massive flooding. So there's almost 1 million people who are now affected by these flooding. So in summary, Horn of Africa is really the epicenter of the climate crisis. People need help, and that's why we are trying to raise funding here. So next Wednesday, 3 p.m., UNWeb TV. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. Questions for Jens? No, I don't see any, so thanks and good luck to you over the coming days. We now turn to our colleague from the World Food Programme in Bangkok, Ms. Anthea Webb, who is WFP's Deputy Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific, who is going to speak about Cyclone Mocha, in particular the emergency food aid, vital in worst affected areas that are already facing the multiple crises in Myanmar and Bangladesh. Ms. Webb, over to you.
Thank you so much. I trust you can hear me.
Very well, thank you.
Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, having been to both Sitwe and Cox's Bazar in the past, I can tell you that Cyclone Mocha has dealt a really cruel blow to some of the people who were really living on the brink in advance of the storm. This part of the Bay of Bengal hosts an incredibly vulnerable group of populations and people. While Myanmar was worst hit, its people have been suffering from the combined effects of conflict, political and economic crises for many years now. And on the other side of the border in Bangladesh, large numbers of vulnerable Bangladeshi families live alongside the largest refugee camp, which is home to almost 1 million Rohingya who depend almost entirely on humanitarian assistance. The cyclone left a trail of devastation across Myanmar's Rakhine state. Houses are flattened, roads have been cut off, hospitals and schools have been destroyed, and telecommunications, as you know, were severely disrupted. Our own office and warehouses also sustained some damage, though we're moving fast to repair them. Heavy rains triggered flash floods and landslides, and today we estimate that at least 800,000 people in the path of the cyclone need emergency food assistance. Greater needs for food, shelter, water, health, and other humanitarian aid are expected to be revealed as we reach more areas. And while Bangladesh was spared a direct hit, nearly 500,000 Bangladeshis and thousands of Rohingyas living in the camps have lost their homes and assets. The World Food Programme's response started even before the storm hit. Ahead of landfall, we had reached 28,000 Bangladeshi in Teknaf with anticipatory cash assistance. That allowed them to prepare for the cyclone before it was too late. and was done with thanks to support from ECHO. Right after the worst had passed, we were already reaching thousands of refugees with emergency food assistance in the camps, and we've worked around the clock so that regular food support can resume. In Myanmar, for a couple of days now, we've already been resuming emergency food distributions to families in evacuation shelters in Rakhine State and in Magwe region. We are mobilizing quickly to expand that assistance to the worst affected townships, and we plan to reach at least 800,000 people in the worst hit areas of Rakhine, Magwe, and Chin for an initial 3 months. Almost half of those people affected had already been displaced by conflict, and having visited some of the areas quite recently, their shelters were extraordinarily vulnerable, and I can't imagine that there is very much left that they can rely on until aid arrives. In both countries, the needs are immense. Bangladesh, the calamity is striking right at the same time as we are facing a very severe funding crisis. In March of this year, funding shortages forced WFP to reduce the value of food vouchers for refugees living in the Cox's Bazar camps. And to give you a sense of the magnitude, that now amounts to just 10 cents per meal per person, which is really stretching our ability to assist minimum levels of nutrition. We urgently need $56 million until the end of the year to be able to continue to provide the very bare minimum assistance to people in those camps. In Myanmar, we're stepping up, and so we need additional funding to be able to reach even more people than we did at the beginning of the year. We require now $60 million to assist a total of 2.1 million people. That includes the 800,000 affected by the cyclone Mocha. In summary, the cyclone has made a bad situation much, much worse for millions of people who were already struggling to cope in very precarious conditions. And as the sheer scale of the disaster emerges, WFP, our UN and NGO partners are working to get aid to those affected as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webb, for that update. Questions for Ms. Webb? Yes, Christophe of AFP, Agence France Presse. Over to you.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my question. I was just wondering about Myanmar. Do you have any assistance by authorities? I mean, you were talking about the conflict in the region that has been the most affected, and I was just wondering if the government, maybe even the army, if you get any help from them, if you want any. If you can give us any information on that. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We operate independently of the de facto authorities, but we have been given access to the areas. This is an arrangement that existed before the cyclone, where movement within the country needs to be approved in advance. And we have received access to some of the affected areas and are negotiating an expansion of that.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes. We have a colleague from Anadolu News Agency in Turkey. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking my question, Rhonda. My question about dead people. After the cyclone Mocha, there is some confusion about the number of dead people. The United Nations and its organization do not clearly report the number of dead people. Also, there are different reports from the local media. Can you provide that how many people that for after this disaster? If not, what is the reason for that? Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. I'm afraid WFP is really not the right organization to be asking for information about casualties. Our focus is on the 800 million people who are still alive and require our assistance. I expect that other agencies might have more information to share with you about the number of people who have been sadly killed or injured on that. Our focus is very much on opening up access to those who still need our assistance today.
Thank you very much. We will try to get figures for you. We know that there have been indeed some significant casualties, but we'll try to get those figures for you. Further questions for Ms. Webb? No, I don't see. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, this afternoon, your time, and good luck to you in your efforts there. Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Matthew of UNHCR, who has an update on the UNHCR appeals for safety of civilians in aid as 1 million displaced by the Sudan crisis. Over to you, Matt.
Morning, Rolanda, and good morning to everyone. Yeah, a quick update from us on the situation in and around Sudan. Over a month since the fighting have started, we're making an urgent appeal for the safety of civilians and to allow humanitarian aid to move into Sudan as we continue to scale up our response for the over 1 million people who have now been recorded as displaced within Sudan or to neighboring countries. Within Sudan, people are braving danger, notably moving from Khartoum, Darfur, and other unsafe areas. Around 88,000 refugees hosted by Sudan have fled Khartoum for safety in White Nile, Gedaref, Kassala, Madani, and Port Sudan. In those locations, UNHCR is delivering critical assistance, including, of course, shelters, household items, clean water and sanitation, healthcare, and education support for refugees and other people who are displaced. In White Nile, over 75,000 South Sudanese refugees have arrived from Khartoum, and UNHCR is verifying new arrivals, settling them into camps, and providing essential relief items while coordinating food distribution with WFP. Eritrean, Ethiopian, and other refugees arriving in eastern Sudan are also being registered and transferred to camps. In total, over 843,000 people have been internally displaced within the country, according to the IOM, with neighboring governments and UNHCR having recorded almost 250,000 crossing borders to date. The numbers of those fleeing to Egypt, which is the largest host, are rapidly increasing. And with partners, we estimate that the numbers currently are around 5,000 every day arrivals. That makes a total of almost 110,000 Sudanese who have entered the country, according to the government. The main entry points along Egypt's southern border are Khustul and Argin, and our partner, the Egyptian Red Crescent, estimates that 90% of the people crossing move north very swiftly to Cairo or to other urban areas. We're also scaling up our assistance in Aswan, which has become something of a transit area for people moving to the north. We're providing emergency assistance at the border through the Egyptian Red Crescent, and new arrivals continue to approach our offices, particularly in Cairo, where they're supported with registration and pre-registration protection services. Many of those who have approached us are in a distressed state, having been exposed to violence or traumatic conditions in Sudan and having suffered arduous journeys. Many have also lost or been separated from their family and in need of urgent medical treatment. Child protection arrangements have been activated for unaccompanied and separated children, including so-called best interest procedures, as well as family tracing. We're also providing support for community-based responses. We have a structure in place in the country, given the number of refugees that were already hosted by Egypt prior to this crisis. In South Sudan, arrival rates remain high at around 1,500 a day. And of the 63,000 who have arrived, many were South Sudanese refugees in Sudan. Most arrive via the Renk crossing in Upper Nile State. The transit facility near the border is becoming perilously crowded and resources are extremely stretched. And that, of course, increases the risks to those who arrive. Despite the logistical challenges, efforts are being made to move people away from those border areas, including via road or via riverboat. In Chad, we've delivered relief items to almost 10,000 families, and we've stepped up our monitoring to address the most pressing protection concerns. Most new arrivals are still in remote transit sites near the border with very limited resources. With our partners, we've started to relocate new arrivals this week to existing camps which are further away from the border. Initially, 20,000 newly arrived Sudanese refugees will move to the camps where they'll receive family shelter and access to education and to healthcare. The imminent onset of the rainy season is adding to the urgency. As ever, the notes will be provided to you and shared online. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, and for sharing the notes as well. We have Emma of Reuters, a question for you. Go ahead, Emma.
Good morning, Matthew. 2 questions, please. You're pleading for safe passage. Am I to assume then that the agreement in Jeddah has not made any difference on the ground? And secondly, the number of refugees and displaced so far, I'm wondering how it compares with your initial projection through to October of over 800,000. Is this happening at roughly the pace that you anticipated at the beginning, or is it going faster than you originally anticipated? Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. You mentioned the agreement in Jeddah. Of course, I think that commitment was extremely important, and I'm sure all our other partners in the United Nations would agree that the commitment to allow civilians to flee the fighting and to allow aid, much urgently needed aid, to come into the country is absolutely essential. Unfortunately, what we've seen in the last couple of days is continued horrendous fighting on the ground, shelling, bombing. And it's extremely important that what was committed to in Jeddah is actually enacted on the ground so that much needed aid can come in. In terms of the pace of the movements, certainly in the last few days, and it depends which country you're talking about, we have seen some increases. The overall planning figure you referred to initially was somewhere over 800,000. That was then revised up to just over 1 million. So I don't think we're seeing anything in these movements that suggests that we would change that planning figure. It looks like it's still realistic at this stage.
Thank you, Matthew. And simply to echo what Matthew suggests, of course, the UN welcomes the signing of the parties of the Declaration of Commitment to protect civilians. And of course, we'll spare no effort to assist that the declaration is implemented properly. Further questions for Matthew? No, I don't see any. So I'd like to thank you very much and have a good afternoon. I'd like to now invite 2 of our guests from WHO and from UNICEF to join me here on the podium. Okay, on my right, Mr. Henry Gray, who is WHO's Incident Manager for the Global Cholera Response. And joining me shortly on my left soon is Mr. Jérôme Fafman-Zambruni, who is UNICEF's Public Health Emergency Unit Head. They are going to speak to a Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan, the SPRP, for cholera. Over to maybe Mr. Gray, if you want.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for making time for us today. So I thought I'd start with just a little bit of an update on the situation, the global situation in terms of cholera. The situation is bad. More countries are reporting cases of cholera, including countries that are not used to dealing with cholera. We're seeing more cases reported. Mozambique and Malawi alone have reported more than 90,000 cases this year already. And we're also seeing worse outcome for patients than we have for more than 10 years, with case fatality rates far exceeding the 1% that we would anticipate in cholera outbreaks. This year, we have seen 24 countries reporting cholera already by mid-May. Last year, the same time period, we saw 15 countries. And we are anticipating this year even more countries reporting with the seasonal shift in cholera cases. Huge progress has been made over the last couple of decades in cholera prevention, but the current situation risks us going backwards. Today, WHO estimates that 1 billion people across 43 countries are at risk of cholera. The drivers for this situation are well known to us: poverty, conflict, and now climate change, and the resulting displacement of these factors. With the increase in the number of countries affected by cholera, the resources that were available are now more for prevention and response are more thinly spread. Oral cholera vaccine is a very good example of that. The supply of vaccine is just insufficient for the demand, and that means we're not able to provide enough vaccine for the ongoing outbreaks, and certainly we have stopped prevention campaigns in identified cholera hotspots. Over 18 million doses of oral cholera vaccine have been requested this year. Only 8 million have been made available. You may remember my colleague Philippe Barbosa briefed you a few weeks ago that we've had to reduce our cholera vaccination strategy, halving the number of doses of vaccine to try and to spin it out. And so we're now dosing only with one dose of vaccine, which doesn't give the same length of protection. Basically, the outlook is bleak. We haven't had enough investment in the long-term strategies that have been identified by the Global Task Force on Cholera Control, particularly in access to safe water and sanitation. And today we have insufficient funds available for immediate response. And that's going to lead to a greater loss of lives that should be saved. So while we continue with the work on the long-term cholera control, we also need to surge our emergency response to deal with the current situation. So today, WHO is launching a 12-month strategic preparedness, readiness, and response plan that will cover over 40 countries in acute crisis with active outbreaks or at high risk of cholera outbreaks. And we're launching this alongside UNICEF's call to action, which Jérôme will brief you on shortly. With the plan, we're going to be working alongside ministries of health and partners to reinforce disease surveillance, to spot outbreaks as before they spread, laboratory capacity to test for cases rapidly, case management to get people to treatment quickly, infection prevention control, health messaging, water testing, and vaccination. The aim is to drastically reduce cholera deaths and cholera transmission while ensuring minimal disruption to essential health and social services. The key here is speed. Cholera kills quickly, and we need to react quickly to save lives. So WHO is going to ask for $160 million for these 40 plus countries over the next 12 months. And this figure sits alongside UNICEF's call to action request of $480 million. It's really important that people understand that the two agencies are working extremely closely together to respond and prepare in a coherent fashion. So we know what we need to do, and we know how to do it, but we also need the funds for it. Thank you.
Mr. Gray, Mr. Zambrini, over to you. Go ahead.
Merci beaucoup. So my name is Jérôme Pfaffman-Zambrini. So you will hear that I'm not Anglophone. So if there is anything that I don't say rightly, please ask me to repeat again or clarify. Thank you very much, Henry. As you can notice, we are practitioners here. So if we come here in front of you because the situation is very, very concerning for cholera. The cholera spread around the world in different countries, different communities, require a global attention. There is a pandemic killing the poor right in front of us. And we know exactly how to stop it, as Henry said. And but yet we need more support, less inertia from the different global community. And because if we don't act now, it's going to get worse, and it's going to reverse all the gain we have made over the past decades on cholera control. Henry presented the number of countries of communities affected is increasing, and we are getting to a point where collectively, WHO, UNICEF, others, the system that exists globally to support country response are getting at the limit. We are saturated. We need more. We need to be able to respond simultaneously to so many outbreaks and emergencies that we need more. We need to increase our capacity. We are getting to a moment where we need to increase our capacity. 6 months ago, we made a call to action and we asked for $150 million. We are 6 months later. We need more than $600 million. We can wait before we act, but if we wait before we act, we will continue to need more, and we will need more resources, more support. We're talking about not resources and money here. We're talking about colleagues, communities in the ground that need support and that are waiting for us. So you'll have more top line. These are the top line. These are the key messages that we wanted to bring to you. You will have the call to action, other strategic response plan, and some other additional key messages that we can share later. But that's really it's more than a call to action and a strategic response plan. We need to wake up. It's a wake-up call. Voilà, thank you.
Thank you both very much for that. A very important message. Go ahead, Christophe, AFP.
Thank you for this briefing. I had two questions. One, can you give us a sense of why suddenly we have this, I have parts of the answer, but a sense of why we have this explosion of cholera in so many countries compared to last year. And then the other thing is, when do you think the vaccine production can be scaled up, and what are the bottlenecks? Thank you.
Okay, perhaps I'd start with the second question, the vaccine production. So there is a plan in place to expand vaccine production. It's not an overnight solution. So we are looking at a potential doubling of the available doses by 2025. And then a further doubling of that by, I believe it's 2027. So, but we still will be very close to the, we won't have enough, even with those numbers, if the current trend for cholera cases continues. So the vaccine is very much it's a tool in the response toolbox, but it is not the overall solution. The overall solution is long-term investment in water, wastewater infrastructure in particular. That's why we don't have cholera in Switzerland. With very good wastewater systems here. So I think that we will continue to see cases, and we will see more and more cases until we have, a bit more equity in terms of infrastructure for water and wastewater. In terms of the why we're seeing more cases, I think it's a combination of all these factors: conflict, displacement, the droughts, and floods. Just the changing weather systems appear to be pushing the systems. Well, the disruption in the weather patterns are making cholera, the environment for cholera, better. And so we are seeing more cholera where we see competition for water sources, where we see flooding. This just it's what cholera wants. We shouldn't underestimate the risks of the unknowns of climate change and how that's going to affect. But it's unlikely to be a positive impact on cholera. So we should be preparing for more cases, basically.
Yeah, if I may just complement too, and just to add, one is it's not only long-term investment in water and system, it's an immediate investment. in water and system that can be the starting point for a long term. But it's really, that's the game changer will be around ensuring access to water, sanitation, hygiene, dignity as a human right for every person affected. That will be the game changer. The vaccines can help break chain of transmission, do preventive. It will be an additional support, but the basis will be around ensuring access to water and sanitation. And I want to also highlight, I mean, we heard the press of all the other updates. Cholera is, as you said, a driver of inequalities, of communities that are affected by conflict, movement of population, affected by hurricanes. This is amplifier, accelerator of cholera outbreak. You heard the briefing. That's the world we are in. So unfortunately, that's also the reason why we see more and more cholera outbreak. This being said, we know how to treat it. We know how to control it. It's how do you say? It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Voilà. So just to complement the feedback.
Thank you both very much. We have a question for you. Oh, sorry, you have a follow-up. Please go ahead, Christophe.
Quick
Of course.
follow-up, just to be clear on the vaccines. You were saying a doubling of the doses. Could you just give us the numbers so that we know what we are?
Yes. So currently we have around a maximum of 3 million doses a month. But it ranges between 2 and 3 million production issues and the like. But it's around 3 million doses a month at the moment.
Yeah, and information are available on the website, I think, of the International Immunization Coordination Group. I'm very bad with acronym. ICG, International Coordination Group for Immunization. We can share the link so you can have all the detailed information of what's available and what's the production.
Thanks, and sorry about that, Christophe. Indeed, if you can share that information, that would be helpful, please.
Bon, ouais. J'ai deux questions. Donc, la première, c'est que quels sont les pays les plus touchés par choléra? Deuxièmement, est-ce qu'il y aura un plan d'action dans le prochain assemblée de l'OMS ou est-ce que sera adopté quelque chose pour lutter contre ce... Oui.
Donc, cette année, les deux pays les plus touchés sont Malawi et Mozambique, mais on attend pour les autres pays. Donc, c'est parce que la saison, ça change et les pays différents sont touchés à les périodes différentes pendant l'année. Il y a cholera, c'est bien sûr, c'est dans un sujet qui va être mentionné, discuté pendant la World Health Assembly. Je crois qu'il y a quelque chose ici au Palais pour parler du choléra et la lutte contre choléra. Ouais, je crois. Peut-être Jérôme, avec meilleur français.
Je peux répondre en anglais aussi. Pardon. Deux choses. Moi, je sais que c'est un peu compliqué ce que je vais essayer de dire, mais l'unité d'analyse des épidémies de choléra, c'est pas forcément les pays, d'accord? Parce que c'est par rapport à des dynamiques communautaires et avec des mouvements de population. Et on voit bien dans certains contextes, les communautés passent d'un endroit à l'autre, surtout quand c'est associé avec des contextes de conflits, etc. Donc, je pense qu'effectivement, comme Henri a dit, l'Afrique de l'Est et du Sud, en ce moment, c'est la zone où il y a les épidémies les plus actives. Mais on voit que si vous nous aviez posé cette question il y a 6 mois, on aurait dit mais c'est le Liban avec la Syrie, parce qu'il y a des saisonnalités et à partir du moment où on n'arrive pas à contrôler une épidémie complètement, on sait que ça va revenir parce que c'est comme on a dit que c'était une des épidémies qui étaient liées avec la l'accès à l'eau et à l'assainissement, et ben donc les saisons des pluies influencent énormément la transmission. Par rapport à qu'est-ce qui va se passer à l'Assemblée générale de l'OMS, bon, l'OMS est mieux placé que moi pour dire ça, mais effectivement, on a en tout cas prévu d'être présent, Henri et moi et tous nos collègues qui travaillent sur la réponse, pour être là avec comment on appelle ça, un stand, enfin, en tout cas, on va être présent pour pouvoir parler avec les pays, parler avec les pays donateurs, les pays affectés, les pays voisins, et pour voir comment on peut continuer à créer cette mobilisation pour contrôler ces épidémies.
Merci. Nous avons 3 questions en plus. Bodhi Hugger of Phoenix TV on Zoom. Go ahead, Bodhi.
Yeah, I have a simple question for, is that the first cholera plan you didn't launch ever before?
And there are cholera plans at a country level and a regional level that come out very frequently. I'm not sure that we've had a global plan like this for this response. There are again, through the global task force on cholera control, there is a very clear plan with objectives up to I think 2030 on the control and elimination of cholera. But this plan is very much focused on the next 12 months because of this resurgence in cases. But there is there's strategic planning, global, regional and country level that exists already. Over.
Thank you, Bodhi. Did you have a follow-up? I see your hand is still up. Go ahead.
No, but I have 2 other topics. Thank you.
Okay, let's hold off on that then, if you don't mind. We'll turn now to Emma of Reuters.
Sorry, it's on another topic as well for WHO.
Okay, let's just wait to see if we have Gabriella. Question on cholera. Gabby?
No, it was after they finished cholera. Yeah, it's on another.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have another question for you from the room. Christophe again, encore.
Just again to make sure that I got it right, on the money you need, it's 160 million for WHO, and then that goes. We have to add to that 480 million for UNICEF. Is that correct in the plan?
Sorry, just to explain also the difference in cost is because, we work together, our plans are coordinated and our response are coordinated. A big component of the driver of the cost is around water and sanitation. And so the investment in the infrastructure, which is the reason why there is this difference in cost between UNICEF and WHO. But really, what needs to be looked at is the total figure. I mean, the what goes to whom is secondary. I think what is important is really to have the idea that we need more than $500 million to address and to respond to this crisis. And it might sound a lot, but it's actually when you divide this by the number of countries that are at risk affected. I mean, we're not talking about something that is that much. I want the addition of the needs is a big number, but given that we're talking about 24 countries in response, plus an additional, 25, that are at risk or need in readiness to be ready to respond, then you divide, the number is not that overwhelming per country and per communities.
Thank you, gentlemen, both very much. I think we have exhausted the questions on this important subject. I just wanted to thank you again for this wake-up call and really appeal to colleagues in the media to really do what you can to raise awareness and hopefully spark the appropriate response for this much-needed issue. So thank you once again. Carla, I think you have some questions. So we'll start. Emma, please pose your question. I think you just have a general question for WHO.
I had 2 questions for WHO. One is on the World Health Assembly. I was just wondering if you could say when the question of Taiwan would be decided? Is that Sunday or Monday, and any details? And secondly, WHO used to give us a Sudan death toll. I haven't seen it in a while. Do you have one, please? Thanks.
Hi, thanks so much for your questions, Emma. So the first one was about Taiwan. So let me address that first. And I can tell you that the involvement, if any, of observers from Taiwan, China in the WHO is a question for the 194 members of WHO and not for the WHO Secretariat. Every year, the members have an opportunity to discuss important proposals during the World Health Assembly, where rules and policies governing WHO are decided. So I can tell you that procedurally, a proposal will first be addressed in the General Committee on Sunday, 21 May, and in the plenary on Monday, 22 May. So that's what I have for you on Taiwan. You had also asked about Sudan. So let me get you the latest figures on Sudan. You can just be patient for a sec because I have a lot of notes here. Hang on one sec. It's further up. Okay, so these are casualties as of May 16th, okay? And these figures are from the Federal Ministry of Health. Overall, 5,287 injuries, 705 deaths. Khartoum State, 3,254 injuries, 203 deaths. Okay, so that's what I have for you on Sudan. Can I also say that, just to update you on attacks on healthcare? So since the 15th of April, WHO has verified 34 attacks on health, leading to 8 deaths and 18 injuries. 21 of these incidents impacted health facilities, while 10 impacted health personnel. Removal of health assets and looting remains the biggest issue. Other attacks included obstruction of access to healthcare, violent attacks using weapons, and the forced occupation of facilities. Since the signing of the Jeddah Declaration on the 11th of May, 4 new reports of attacks have been verified. However, we cannot yet identify any trends or assess the impact of the declaration. And finally, if I could just add that WHO stands with the people of Sudan and is staying and delivering despite the enormous challenges. And we are working with partners for a coordinated response. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. We have Gabriela now. I think a question also for you. Gabby?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Orlando. I have 2 questions. I have not seen detailed information about the WHA. Maybe I miss it, but I would like to know details about next week, list of attendees, list of speakers in the high-level segment, side events, etc., etc. And second question, I would like to know if you have reports about a type of weapon, such as flammable cluster bombs that Russia is using in its recent attacks against Ukraine. If you are receiving reports about this and about these weapons, and what are the risks for the civilian population? Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question. So let me just reiterate a couple of things about the World Health Assembly, which of course is taking place in Geneva from the 21st until the 30th of May. And the theme of this year's Health Assembly is WHO at 75, Saving Lives and Driving Health for All. I think I mentioned that in Tuesday's briefing. And I wanted everyone to know that for the high-level welcome on Sunday, the 21st of May, we will send a run of show and list of speakers. And we will also send the WHA 76 opener press release today or over the weekend. We are working very hard to get you this information as soon as we possibly can. What else can I tell you about WHA 76? Yeah, so on Sunday, May the 21st, following a photo with heads of delegations, the high-level General Assembly welcome at Palais des Nations will feature speeches from the WHO Director General, heads of state, and special guests. And as I said, we will send details on that list of speakers as soon as we possibly can. And don't forget that the Director General will give his main address at approximately 10 a.m. on Monday, the 22nd of May, and he'll be awarding 2 lifetime achievements to 2 global health personalities. Strategic roundtables, really interesting, really important information you can glean there. As I've said before, the first one will focus on member state-led processes to strengthen pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. And that will happen at 1 o'clock on Monday. That's the first of the strategic roundtables. As far as, yeah, I mean, I could go into more detail on WHA, but you let me know if you have any other questions on that. And what I can tell you, about Ukraine, I can't speak to those specific questions that you asked about the weapons, but I'd be happy to try to chase and check that information for you. And I'd just like to say that, Ukraine's health system remains resilient after well over a year of relentless war, but barriers remain. The Russian Federation's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on 24 February 2022 has caused a deterioration in the level of access to healthcare services and medicines in the country, particularly for people living in regions close to the front line and areas that are partially controlled by the government of Ukraine, and for people who have been internally displaced. WHO continues to deliver life-saving medical supplies across Ukraine in coordination with local and national authorities to ensure the health system is functioning. And WHO works across a range of programmatic areas to train healthcare workers, to support efforts in mental health and psychosocial support provision, to rehabilitation efforts, among many other areas. And we must do everything we can to preserve and protect the health system in Ukraine. And that includes supporting health workers. And WHO is working around the clock to deliver life-saving supplies, repair damaged facilities, and to train health workers and other responders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carla. And of course, just to echo what we've said many, many times, that the use of cluster bombs is utterly unacceptable and to be condemned. Questions? We have Body Hugger. Go ahead, Body.
I have 2 questions. First, probably to you and to Carla also, that about WHA. What's the procedure of security? Which access we can get in the Palais? Thank you.
Okay, I think probably I'll defer to Rolando on this question of security and access to the Palais during WHA. I do know that if you have a badge, you can certainly enter the Palais premises and attend any meetings, any sessions, certainly those roundtables. where there's room and where there's access. But I know that Rolando is looking after accreditation for the media. So over to you, Rolando.
Thank you, Carl. Indeed, we are, that is the Information Services, looking after media accreditation. And I can confirm that the building will be fully operational on Sunday, early 8 o'clock in the morning. I believe the gates will open at the Prigny Gate. Incidentally, the Prigny Gate office will be, is now being more or less fully operational. As you know, it's been under renovation, but you'll be able to go through there. So colleagues with a proper badge will be able to access as they would any other day. Did you have another question, Buddy?
Yeah, sure. To color, I have, I received from WHO regarding to the ethical concern on the moral implication of the first UK baby born in the DNA from 3 people. You tried to answer my question, but I'm still disappointed that the response you provided lacked this substantive information and merely copied a few lines from 2021 report. And you've suggested me to check with UK communities that failed to address my specific concerns. So, as the global community deserved clear guidance and effective governments on such matters, I raise again my questions that how does the WHO assess and consider the ethical standards and guidelines surrounding the implementation of a procedure involving the artificial baby? And what WHO position on the ongoing utilization of such technical in various laboratory settings?
Thank you, Buddy.
Thanks very much, Buddy. So the WHO recognizes the potential health benefits and also the risks associated with these types of technologies and processes. And of course, as well as the ethical issues they also raise. So WHO has an expert advisory committee on developing global standards for governance and oversight of human genome editing, and they released their findings in July 2021. And WHO is working to implement those findings of the expert advisory committee, including a framework for governance. Again, WHO advocates for strong engagement models on these types of technologies, as well as effective governance and the presence of a robust regulatory environment before potentially moving forward. The WHO does not make laws or regulations, but can offer guidance, editing, and the advisory committee developed a framework for governance. And this can be used to help national governments navigate these types of issues. And these types of issues will continue to occur, as we go into the future, and a future that heavily involves AI and, potentially gene editing and technologies. So we are looking at this. We are looking forward and into the future on this, and we are concerned about the types of risks associated with these kinds of technologies and processes. But we also recognize the potential health benefits. And that's what I have to say for now on that. I can send the link to the framework. I think I've already sent that to you, Buddy, but if anyone else would like that, happy to send that. And I'll also send the notes from our speaker on cholera earlier. Thanks.
That would be most helpful. Thank you, Carla, very much for elaborating on that. Do we have further questions before I relieve you, Carla? No? Okay. On that note, thank you very much for joining us up here. And before we conclude, I just have a few announcements of my own to recite, starting with the Secretary General's travels. As we indicated in the note we shared with you earlier this week, the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is attending the Group of 7 summit in Hiroshima, Japan. Tomorrow, the 20th of May, he will take part in 2 working group sessions, one on working together to address multiple crises, where Mr. Guterres is expected to call on G7 countries to deliver financial justice for developing countries. And on one session titled Common Endeavor for a Resilient and Sustainable Planet, where the Secretary General's messages to G7 countries will be to create the conditions for a dramatic reduction of emissions in the present decade, both in developed and emerging economies. During his visit to Hiroshima, the Secretary General will also meet with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and with other leaders present at the summit. And we also expect him to have a press encounter on Sunday. We don't have the specific details at the moment. We will keep you updated with notes we receive pertaining to the visit of Mr. Guterres in Japan. Human rights meetings, treaty body meetings. The Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women will review the report of Iceland on Monday, this coming Monday, the 22nd of May, starting at 10 a.m. And on Tuesday, the 23rd of May at 10 a.m., the Conference on Disarmament will hold a plenary meeting devoted to disarmament and the gender perspective in the context of women, peace, and security agenda as part of the general debate on the comprehensive program of disarmament. Press conferences, we have 3 scheduled thus far for next week. On Monday, the 22nd of May at 11:30 a.m. in this room, we'll have an update on the humanitarian situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This is a press conference orchestrated by Ocha. Mr. Bruno Lemarquis, the Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General, Resident Coordinating, Humanitarian Coordinating, will speak here at 11:30 on Monday. Tuesday at 2 p.m., Tuesday the 23rd, UNRWA, the UN Relief Works Agency, Health Conditions of Palestinian Refugees in the Near East. The speaker is Akiro Saita, the UNRWA Director of Health. And lastly, on Wednesday, the 24th of May at 10 a.m., Mr. Turk, Volker Turk, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, will brief you here in this room at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 24th. So do take a note of that important date. And hold on a second, I think I have a couple of additional, observances before I close. Observances. On Monday, we observe the International Day for Biological Diversity. And this day provides an opportunity for us to reflect on our relationship with humanity's life support system and to take stronger and faster action against biodiversity loss and the climate crisis. And we shared the SG's message with you yesterday. And tomorrow is World Bee Day. And this day aims to raise awareness on the essential role that bees and other pollinators play in keeping people and the planet healthy, and on the many challenges they face today. And before we close on this Friday morning, still morning, I have a trivia question for you. Whoever wants to throw it in the chat, the question is, what % of the world's crops producing fruits and seeds for human use depend at least in part on pollinators? So what % of the world's crops depend on bees and pollinators? Anyone? Okay, just shout out if you have an answer or in the chat. Well, I'll just throw, it's kind of a rhetorical question. So it's 75%. 75% of the world's crops producing fruits and seeds for human use depend at least in part on pollinators, including bees. So on that note, unless you have questions for me, I don't see any. So I'd like to wish you a nice weekend and a good afternoon.
Recording stopped.